welcome back. It is Monday. I am Mr. Sesatris, and this week I wanted to talk about really big classics that are actually worth your time. Classics are a ton of fun. I really enjoy them. I really enjoy reading them. I think for the purpose of this channel, I am going to be talking about classics more and maybe fantasy less. I still love fantasy, but I think there's a ton of really amazing fantasy booktubers out there, and there's not as many ones who focus on classics, and so I wanted to focus on that a little bit more because I'm really passionate about it, and I'm a nerd, and that's just how that works. So, reading classics is a lot of fun because usually you can spend more time with them. They tend to be kind of slower sometimes, not all the times, but it's more about like just enjoying the language and getting kind of lost in the world. They're very comforting to me, and they're very calming in a way, especially in light of all the chaotic things happening on the news and all the wackiness therein. I feel like classics are a good escape from reality. I mean, all books are, but for me, classics are a very good escape. But there are some that are not fun to read. There are some that are good, but are still not fun to read. I'm looking at you. Oops, not this one. I'm looking at you, James Joyce. There are people, weird people, who enjoy reading and analyzing Ulysses, but this is a book that would break even the most intelligent lit nerd's brain because it's so dense and experimental, and it's good, but it's good in a literary sense, not in a I want to read something that I enjoy sense. So this is not on this list. But here are 5 examples of really thick classics that are genuinely really good and enjoyable to read. They have satisfying conclusions, they have great characters, and they're generally a ton of fun. So let's get into this list, and we'll see how this goes. So first up on this list is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. This is a big one. I adore this book, and I think the fact that it was released sort of episodically, like it was released in sections, helps to make it really readable despite its length, because it's not like one big story that you have to get to the end to get the payoff. It's like a series of episodes, and at the end of each episode there is kind of a satisfying conclusion, or at least a good cliffhanger to keep you going. And so it doesn't feel like you're reading just one giant enormous book. It reads more like you're reading maybe a trilogy or a 4-part series of shorter novels. But the characters in this are just a ton of fun. My favorite character forever will always be Betsy Trotwood. I love her so much. She's kind of one of those stern, imposing characters who will call you out for making bad decisions, but if someone else says something mean to you, she will go full mama bear and just take them down amazingly, and it's so satisfying. She's such a great character. She's grumpy and complains a lot, but when push comes to shove, her heart's in the right place, and she is scary when she's mad, and you really want her to be on your side. So this is just so much fun. There's another character called Uriah Heep, who's just the creepiest, slimiest person ever, and he's just the worst. But throughout all this, you have kind of David Copperfield himself, kind of going through sort of a rags to riches type story. He's sort of abused as a child and treated very badly, and he kind of, over the course of his life, is able to kind of find a path through life that works for him. This was a book that I think Dickens himself used a lot of his own life to inspire. the events in it. And so that does come across. It feels very real, even though it has kind of a fanciful kind of English fantasy sort of feel about it. And there's no magic or anything, but it does feel that way. It still is really, really compelling. And it's so much fun. And you just want to see David Copperfield succeed. You want to see him like be treated well by others. And there's just a number of things. You see him at the beginning, he's very naive, he's very young and very trusting, and everyone around him takes advantage of that. They're just awful, awful people. And so the progression through his life as he kind of grows up, he grows kind of smarter and more mature, and the friendships that he forms and the relationships that are important to him. It's so great. This is just a wonderful, wonderful book. And you get to the end and you're just like, aw. It's very, very satisfying. So it is huge, but think of it more as like a series of shorter books, and don't rush through it. Just enjoy it. There is also a really great audiobook version on Audible. I think it's an Audible exclusive, narrated by Richard Armitage, who does a really, really good job. The voices are all incredible. His voice for Betsy Trotwood is just delightful, and it's a lot of fun. So I highly, highly, highly recommend this one. It is a good book, and it is worth your time, even though it's enormous. Next up, we have The Count of Monte Cristo, and this one's kind of a cheat. In a previous video, I mentioned that I read the abridged version of this one when I was younger. So I've read the story, but not this story. So here, the abridged version is like this big. And this is the one that I read when I was younger. I recently got another copy of this, but the full text is much longer. So I don't normally like to talk about books that I haven't read, but I know the gist of the story, and I do want to read the full text of it. So this is kind of a cheat, forgive me. But I really, really want to talk about this one. This book is huge, but it's worth it. It's adventure, and it's also just this great revenge story. It's got kind of a Batman feel to it. You know, this character goes through so much hardship at the beginning. He's falsely accused for something, and he goes to prison. It's this really creepy, like, island fortress prison called the Chateau d'If, and there's like this really complicated prison escape, and he kind of amasses this huge fortune, and then uses this huge fortune to get revenge on the people who wronged him. And that's like most of the book. Like the prison escape is like this part, and everything else is just him setting things up so that he can have this amazing revenge on the people who've wronged him. And it's just so much fun. And I do want to read just the whole thing. There's also a couple really good audio recordings of this one as well. But what I love about this one is, again, it's kind of episodic, kind of like David Copperfield was. So there's like big sections. And so it doesn't feel oppressive as like a huge book. Now, I say that not having read the huge book, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But this is still a really, really good story, and the ending is intensely satisfying. I do want to read this full version someday when I have time. But it is definitely a worthwhile read. The characters are great, and I just love the, like I said, the kind of superhero quality. Like, it isn't really a superhero story, but it kind of has a lot of those qualities of like Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, you know, especially the third one, where like, you know, he's kind of down on his luck and he goes to prison and then he comes back and it's very triumphant and everything. But it's so great. And I promise I will never recommend a book that I've never read in its entirety again, but this is one that I can confidently say the ending is worth it, and I really, really, really want to read the full text of this one. It's so much fun. Next up on the list is a mega fave of mine. I love this one, and that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. This book is so satisfying. The characters, their stories don't turn out the way you think they will. There's lots of ups and downs. This is very much like a soap opera, kind of a, oh, if you like Downton Abbey, or something like that. It's very much a soap opera where we see kind of what they want in the beginning and all of the trials and tribulations that they go through, and then see kind of where they end up. And those character arcs are really, really good. There's characters who don't get what you think they're going to get. There's characters who succeed brilliantly. There's some who crash and burn. There's kind of some fairy tale idealism that's really crushed in one character. There's another character who is in love with this one person, and this person doesn't even know that this other person exists, or thinks of them that way, and then you're like screaming at the page. You're like, he likes you! But yeah, it's so great. There's also this really satisfying epilogue at the end that kind of gives you a breakdown of exactly how everyone's lives turned out. It kind of does like a, you know, this is what happened for each person kind of at the rest of their life. And it's so great. Like, you go through all of this and it's just really, really wonderful. The female characters in this are really well written. They're complex. They're interesting. They're not all like perfect, virtuous angel in the house types that you see a lot in 19th century. They feel more like the way Jane Austen sort of wrote them, like strong, independent, smart, desperately trying to make a change in the world, but not really having the capacity to do so. And so they have to kind of work within the limits of society to get kind of what they want. And it's so great. This is very much a slow burn. So this isn't an action-packed romp like Count of Monte Cristo is. It's very much, you know, a realistic novel. It's not melodramatic, but you really see characters grow and change and evolve over time. And I just really love the progression of how things end up, because there's like really messy stuff, and there's a couple characters who just fall to the bleakest depths of despair, and then something happens that's kind of, you know, able to change things for them. And it's really, really satisfying. The cast of characters is wonderful. The character of Fred and the character of Dorothea Brooke and Fred Vinci, I love them so much. Their stories are so good. And one of them, there's a really good depiction of kind of what it's like when you marry someone who you think is like perfect for you, and then you discover immediately, like on your honeymoon, that like the marriage isn't gonna work. It isn't going to last, and you've made a terrible mistake, and you can't escape it. And it's so gripping. This is such a character-focused story, and I highly, highly recommend this. I read this one over like a month. There is an audiobook version, but I think for this one, I read it, I started the audiobook, but I DNF'd it because I couldn't keep track of all the characters. And so I read it in physical form, and it was a totally different experience. I was able to keep track of everyone and follow it a little better. I guess this is how my brain works. But I really, really enjoyed the process of reading it. So Middlemarch, George Eliot, it is worth it, I promise. It's really satisfying. Next up, we have The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. Now, I know Les Mis is the bigger book, and I do genuinely love that one, but that one can be a bit of a slog if you're not interested in hearing all about Victor Hugo's many hyperfixations. I do enjoy that book dearly. I really enjoyed reading it, but I feel like this one is a better, just a better reading experience, especially if you've never read Hugo before. There's a couple different translations. This is one that I really like. You know what? I don't know what the name of the translator is in this one. That's so terrible. I'm a bad person. Oh yeah, Isabel Hapgood. That's right. Isabel Hapgood is the translator on this one, and I really like this version. This is one of those books that there's a lot of different storylines that don't seem to be connected until they are connected, and when they come together in the end, it's just perfect. It's very melodramatic. This is a very tragic, devastating, brutal book. And this is not like the Disney movie kind of gets it, but it gives it a happy ending, which it absolutely does not have. But it's just a really good read. The characters are great, and there's some characters that have not appeared in other adaptations, so there's a lot of kind of new faces in this one. But now there is a couple things to be aware of. There is a lot of stuff in here that has not aged well in terms of how it portrays the Roma people. There's some things that Hugo is trying to do to like fight against like stereotypes, which he does kind of do, but it's the 1800s, and so he still gets a couple things wrong. So there's old-fashioned, frankly hateful language used to describe Roma people. If that bothers you, you know, it's okay. You don't have to read this one. But like read this one with discernment, because like plot-wise, it's very well crafted. And I feel like the drama of it is worth the investment of time. There's also some really good audiobooks of this one as well. But just be aware, Victor Hugo was trying to do the right thing, but didn't quite make it, you know. Like he was a champion for the poor and oppressed, and that's one thing I really like about Victor Hugo. But you know, there is still some things that he didn't get right. So, you know, be aware of that. But with that said, overall, the story of this one is just great. It's very dramatic. There's some comedy in it as well that kind of lessens things up, but it's just the finale, the way all the different storylines come crashing together in brutal, devastating ways. Like, there's one character who dies so gruesomely that you're like, really? That's something that's allowed in a book written at that time? Like, it's crazy. But it's still a ton of fun, and I really, really enjoy it. I'm willing to give Hugo the benefit of the doubt in terms of how he portrayed the Roma people, because he was trying. He wasn't a hateful person, but he was a little ignorant in how to describe them perfectly, and a lot of the descriptions of them come from hateful characters like Frollo, who hates them. And so, like, be aware of that. There is racism towards these people by other characters. So that's something to be aware of. One other thing that I don't think any other adaptations have really gotten right, Frollo is kind of a creepy alchemist. He lives in this like gothic tower filled with like potions and strange devices, and he's constantly working to uncover the secret of the Philosopher's Stone. And that's not something that really anything else kind of mentions. They always portray him as just a holy man, and in this one he's kind of a holy man who also dabbles in like the occult and everything. So it is good. I really, really enjoy the reading process of this. But just beware, you know, there are some things that have not aged super well. So just go into that kind of aware of that. But the book itself is really good. And finally, the last book on this list is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I adore this book. This is one of my favorites. It feels very modern. This is a translation by David Magershak, there we go. David Magershak is the translator, and it feels very fresh and modern. Its depictions of relationships and marriage was probably quite shocking and scandalous for its day, but it's a testament to how well Tolstoy kind of understands people, that this book has stood the test of time and still feels relevant and meaningful today. There's lots of messy society stuff, scandals. The main thrust of the story is a character who basically just says, I'm going to have an affair, and I'm going to have a public affair, and who's going to stop me? Like, whatever, I'm going to do my thing. and it's so good. It's just gripping and engaging. And then on top of that, there's another plot line which follows a character named Levin, who is just, he's such a good person. He's sweet, and he respects his wife, and he's just a good, wholesome, wonderful person. And so you've got these two stories of like this person self-destructing publicly, and just taking, you know, as many people down as she can. And then you've also got this other story of like this good, happy marriage. And it really makes the messy society stuff stand out a whole lot more. But it's wonderful. The scandals and the drama and the parties and the gossip and all that stuff is just delicious. It's wonderful. This is such a fun book. And it is big, but it doesn't really feel like a chore. It doesn't feel like a slog. But it's just, it's so good. At this point, I'm just ranting. I'm just saying it's good over and over again. Because I want everyone to read it, because I want to talk to other people about this book. If you have read this book, please mention it, because I want to nerd out with other people who have read it. This is great. There was a movie version done fairly recently with Keira Knightley that was sort of interesting. It took some liberties with the story, and it kind of sets it up as kind of almost a play. Like it's very kind of artificial. It takes place on a stage kind of thing. And it was beautiful. I remember it being really, really pretty, but it didn't have the same impact in terms of like the plot. And I think that's why, or I think the reason why is because they didn't focus so much on Levin's story. They focused just on her story. And you really need that like parallel story of like a good person doing nice things and respecting his wife, and things are going well, and he's so wholesome, and like you just want to hug him and tell him thanks for being such a nice person. And that really contrasts, and it makes all the other stuff stand out so much more. So I feel like this story works the best in book form. It could possibly work as like a miniseries, possibly, but I feel like right now the best version of the story is the book. So Anna Karenina, Leo Tolstoy, read it, love it. Please talk to me about it, because I want to talk to people about it, because it's so good. And that is the end of my list. Thank you so much for watching. This was basically just an excuse for me to nerd out about books that I really love. My suggestions for reading these is just don't rush. I know if you're reading something like a romance or a mystery or a fantasy novel, the book kind of rewards a quick reading where you just kind of breathlessly race along to follow the plot, and you get to the end and it's a lot of fun. But I feel like with classics, a lot of times it's best to just let it happen. Like, don't rush. You can read this along with something else, like maybe read like a third of it and then read another book and then come back and then read the next third, that kind of thing. So that way it doesn't feel like such an overwhelming slog. Classics also really reward tandem reading. If you read it read the book while listening to the audiobook at the same time, especially if you've got a really good narrator who does the voices well. But the biggest suggestion is just don't rush it, and also don't feel overwhelmed. Even though they're big books, they were read initially in parts. A lot of them, they were read like periodicals would publish like, you know, part 1, and then people would read it, and then next month they would get part 2 or something. And so they were read in chunks, kind of like the way you'd consume like a TV series, or like a comic series. Like, it's not like, you know, when you're reading a graphic novel collection of a bunch of issues, originally they were like one issue at a time kind of thing. So don't feel pressured to like race through it, and like they can take some time. I think a lot of these, they take about like a month or 3 weeks or so to read. I'm a slower reader, so maybe you can get through it faster, but just enjoy the experience of just living in these worlds. A lot of the thing that really grabs you in these is the language and just the characters. And so it's not so much shocking plot twist, although Count of Monte Cristo is like that. But it's more about just seeing what happens and then being surprised when something does happen. So don't rush, don't feel bad. Classics are super rewarding, especially these ones, because they're all fun. Like, these aren't like there is lots of analysis of like government and society and human nature and all that, but they're not like philosophical texts the way something like Ulysses is. So they're meant to be entertaining, they're meant to be fun, they're meant to be engaging, and so just kind of go with the flow and read through them, and I promise you will enjoy them. They're a good change of pace from other things. But thank you so much for watching. This has been a ton of fun, and it was a little less coherent than I think previous videos have been, because it was just me nerding out, but it's okay. Anyways, so I will see you next week, and in the meantime, keep reading. Thank you much. Bye.